All right, listeners, buckle up. Today, we're going deep into the world of Apache warfare
Oh
tactics.
yeah, exciting stuff.
We're diving into tactical prowess of Apache warriors in warfare. This book really breaks down what made them such formidable opponents.
It's interesting. We often hear about how fierce they were,
Yeah.
but we don't always grasp the how behind their success. Their strategy was key.
Totally. To fully appreciate that strategy, though, we got to understand their history.
Absolutely. Picture this, a people constantly on the move, adapting to some of the harshest landscapes in the Southwest.
Wow.
And that shaped the identities of all those different Apache tribes.
So they're already masters of adaptation even before we factor in warfare.
Exactly. Then you had the conflicts, right?
Hmm.
Other indigenous groups, European settlers encroaching on their lands, and then bam, the U.S. government. Warfare for the Apaches, it wasn't just about survival. It was about pushing back, asserting their identity and resilience in the face of all that pressure.
Sounds like the perfect recipe for becoming masters of guerrilla warfare.
And that's precisely what they were. They couldn't match their enemies in sheer numbers or firepower.
Right.
So they had to get creative, strategic, hit-and-run tactics, ambushes.
Oh, yeah.
They used the terrain to their advantage in ways those larger forces just couldn't counter.
The book really brings this to life with the story of Geronimo and Cochise during the Apache Wars.
Oh, yeah. Great example.
I mean, facing the full might of the U.S. Army, and they're not just surviving, they're thriving.
It's about flexibility, you see. The book describes how they'd combine ambushes with deception, using the terrain as a weapon. Think
Oh,
Geronimo, almost like a phantom,
wow.
melting into those mountains, then suddenly striking where the enemy least expected it. He kept them guessing, off balance.
So it's not just about winning battles, it's about breaking the enemy's spirit, their will to fight.
Exactly, and a big part of that, the Apaches' incredible intelligence gathering, their scouts, legendary,
Oh, yeah, they were good.
infiltrating enemy camps, learning troop movements, supply lines, you name it. Geronimo was a master.
This is where it gets really interesting to me. It wasn't just about getting the intel.
Uh-huh.
They used it for psychological warfare.
Oh, absolutely. They cultivated this reputation for ferocity. Through stories, actions, it was calculated, this use of terror, a strategy to disrupt the enemy's thinking, morale, everything.
So powerful how perception shapes conflict.
Absolutely. Fear, uncertainty, just as effective as any weapon.
Now, something I think a lot of people don't realize, the role of women in Apache warfare. It wasn't that traditional separation you often see.
You're right. Apache women, they were involved in every aspect of their society, not just the domestic stuff.
Right.
They gathered food, made tools, clothing, but they were also active in decision-making, shaping their tribe's course.
And then when war came.
Their roles became even more vital.
So we're not just talking about caretakers here.
Not at all. Think women communicating with scouts, relaying intel, even mediating peace talks. One striking example from the book is Lawson, a warrior and prophetess who fought alongside her brother Victorio. Her skill in battle, strategy, legendary.
She totally flips our assumptions about what it meant to be a warrior in Apache culture.
Right, and she wasn't an exception. Apache women were central to their success in warfare. It makes you think, huh?
Yeah.
Women were way more influential than we often give them credit for.
Okay, so let's talk weapons. What gets me is they were often outmatched technologically, right? But they made the most of what they had.
Oh, they did it with such skill. Their craftsmanship was amazing. Bows, arrows, spears, knives, clubs, all made with such precision from natural materials.
Yeah. The book emphasizes that these weren't just tools to them. They were like extensions of the warrior's spirit, imbued with cultural significance.
Absolutely. And their mastery of these weapons, impressive.
Impressive.
Archery, incredibly accurate, fast, and in close combat. Agile, ferocious with spears and knives.
So it's not just about the weapons themselves, it's about how they used them, along with the terrain and their tactics.
Exactly. Their understanding of the environment, that emphasis on surprise, mobility,
Yeah.
it all came together.
We often forget about logistics in warfare. Even the fiercest warriors need supplies, right?
Right.
And the Apaches, facing such challenging conditions, they were masters of keeping their fighting force supplied.
Their nomadic lifestyle, that was crucial. They knew how to travel light, live off the land, finding food, water, even in the harshest environments, and preserving food to last through those long campaigns.
And it's that communal aspect again, right?
Absolutely. Sharing resources, especially during scarcity, that was key. Shows how strong their sense of community was, how vital that cooperation was to their success.
It's amazing how those logistical strategies, born out of necessity, can teach us about efficiency and resilience even today.
Definitely. And, speaking of those lessons for today, think about how the Apaches used psychological warfare. It wasn't just about brute force.
No, definitely not. They really understood how to dismantle an enemy, get into their mindset, play on their fears.
The Apaches were masters at that. They didn't just instill fear, they turned it into a weapon.
The book even gives this chilling example. Like, sometimes after a raid, they'd purposely leave evidence of their brutality.
Not just to terrify, but to, like, sow discord among their enemies.
Yeah.
Imagine that paranoia, the distrust.
Wow. Dividing your opponent from within, classic strategy. But the Apaches, they were experts.
They knew a fractured enemy is a vulnerable enemy. Shatter their morale, their unity, just as much as their physical forces.
Okay, let's talk weapons tech.
Yeah.
It's interesting, they weren't wielding some, like, super advanced weaponry.
Right. Not like some ancient superpower.
Yeah.
But that's what makes their ingenuity so remarkable.
Hmm.
They were masters of adaptation, squeezing every ounce of advantage from what they had.
The book goes into their craftsmanship, the way they'd create bows and arrows, spears, knives, clubs, all from natural materials.
And it wasn't just about, functionality. Those weapons were infused with cultural, spiritual significance.
Like extensions of the warrior spirit, you could say.
Exactly. And their skill using them, honed over generations, passed down through tradition.
The book describes how they could hit targets with their bows and arrows from, like, unbelievable distances.
And up close, their speed, their agility with spears and knives, it was legendary.
It shows how adaptable they were, blending their weapons and tactics with, like, the demands of the environment.
Masters at turning perceived weaknesses into strengths.
And it wasn't just the physical weapons, right? It was about understanding how to use them strategically. With the terrain, their whole philosophy.
Absolutely. Their approach to warfare was holistic, every element carefully considered.
We often overlook the importance of logistics in warfare, but even the toughest warriors gotta eat, right?
Exactly.
Need supplies. And the Apaches, operating in some of the harshest conditions, they were incredibly skilled at keeping their fighting force supplied.
Their nomadic lifestyle, that was
Yeah.
key. Traveling light, living off the land, their knowledge of the environment, that was crucial.
Like they were walking encyclopedias of survival,
Yeah.
knowing where to find water, what plants were safe to eat.
Exactly. They also mastered food preservation, ensuring they could sustain themselves, even during long campaigns.
And that communal aspect pops up again.
Oh, absolutely. Survival, especially in conflict, it depended on sharing, supporting one another.
And that communal spirit, it wasn't just about logistics, was it? It was woven through their entire approach to warfare.
You're right. Individual success was always tied to the well-being of the group. Powerful lesson. That goes beyond the battlefield.
Speaking of powerful lessons, we've talked about the vital roles of Apache women, but can we dig a little deeper?
Of course. It really does challenge our preconceived notions of, what makes a warrior.
The book makes it very clear. Apache women, they were vital to every aspect of their tribe's survival, not just during peacetime, but in war as well.
Absolutely. It went way beyond the traditional domestic duties we might picture. They gathered food, prepared it, crafted tools and clothing, cared for the young and the old.
But their roles extended so much further.
Oh, yeah. They were deeply involved in the decision-making, participating in councils, advising leaders.
So their insights and perspectives were actually valued.
Oh, absolutely. And in times of war, their contributions, they became even more critical.
It wasn't just about, like, supporting the warriors from the sideline.
No. They were actively involved in the strategy, logistics, even the fighting.
The book describes women communicating with scouts, relaying intelligence, acting as intermediaries in those peace talks.
And then, of course, we have the incredible Lawson, the warrior prophetess who fought alongside her brother Victorio.
Such a powerful example. Her skill in battle, her strategic planning, it's legendary.
Her story, along with countless others, really forces us to rethink those traditional narratives we have about women in conflict.
It's a reminder that courage and leadership come in many forms. History's full of unsung heroes.
It highlights the Apaches' fluidity, their adaptability. They recognized and utilized the strengths of all members of their community.
I'm curious about some specific battles, campaigns, that really highlight the Apaches' ingenuity. The book mentions a few, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. One that jumps out is the Battle of Apache Pass back in 1862, during those early stages of the Apache Wars. It perfectly illustrates how they'd used their knowledge of the terrain to outmaneuver, a larger, better equipped force.
So we're talking classic David and Goliath.
Exactly. This battle took place in a narrow mountain pass in Arizona. Landscape the Apaches knew like the back of their hands.
And the U.S. Army probably used to fighting on open battlefields.
Right, walked right into a trap,
Wow.
essentially. The Apaches used that terrain to their advantage, setting up ambushes, launching surprise attacks, then vanishing before the army could really respond.
It must have been incredibly frustrating for those soldiers,
Oh yeah, the Apaches inflicted heavy casualties, ultimately forced the army to retreat.
It's a great example of, even when facing overwhelming odds, ingenuity and strategic thinking can turn the tide.
The Battle of Apache Pass, it became a symbol of Apache resistance, a testament to their tactical brilliance.
What other campaigns stood out to you?
Well, you can't talk about Apache warfare without mentioning Geronimo's escape from the U.S. Army in the 1880s.
That wasn't just one battle, right? It was a years-long campaign.
It was a remarkable game of cat and mouse across those rugged landscapes of the Southwest.
With Geronimo leading a small band of warriors, constantly outmaneuvering a much larger force.
His knowledge of the terrain, paramount. He used those canyons, deserts, mountains as his allies, disappearing, reappearing, seemingly at will.
Like a phantom, a legend the soldiers whispered about.
And it wasn't just his physical skills either. He was a master of psychological warfare, spreading rumors, misinformation.
Wow. No wonder he became such a symbol of Apache resistance.
His escape, it cemented his legendary status as a warrior. Testament to the power of resilience, adaptability, that profound connection to the environment.
It's a story that shows us what's possible when human ingenuity, determination meets, seemingly impossible challenges.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that inspiration can be found in the most unexpected places. The Apaches, despite facing constant pressure, those overwhelming odds.
They adapted, they innovated, and ultimately, they thrived.
It's amazing to think about. The Apaches held off those massive, well-equipped forces for so long.
Yeah, it's incredible. What's the secret?
Well, it's a classic example of asymmetric warfare, right?
Yeah.
They couldn't win a head-to-head conventional battle, so they had to change the game, use their agility, those unconventional tactics, to even the odds.
Like masters of judo, using their opponent's strength against them.
Exactly. Hit-and-run tactics, ambushes, and always, that terrain, it was their ally. Strike hard and fast, then vanish before the enemy can even react.
I bet that was demoralizing for those soldiers. It's not just the physical defeat, it's that feeling of you can't even grasp who you're fighting.
Right, this constant tension, a sense of vulnerability. And the Apaches were masters of psychological warfare, too. They knew fear and uncertainty, just as effective as any weapon.
It's all about understanding, isn't it? This deep dive has really shown me how important it is to see things from different perspectives.
The Apaches were incredibly perceptive. They were reading their enemies, anticipating their moves, but they were also tuned in to those cultural differences. They knew their opponents often underestimated them, especially, the role of women in their society.
And that blindness, that cultural blindness, led to some serious miscalculations.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a lesson that goes way beyond the battlefield, right? Whether you're negotiating a deal or just trying to understand someone with different beliefs, that cultural intelligence is a game changer.
Stepping outside your own assumptions, seeing the world through someone else's eyes.
Empathy, perspective taking, those are the keys.
This has been such an awesome deep dive into Apache warfare. It's way more than just historical battles. It's like this treasure trove of lessons. Resilience, strategy, human ingenuity.
They were masters of adaptation, constantly innovating just to survive and thrive. Their legacy, it offers us some timeless wisdom.
So for our listeners out there, what's the one takeaway you really want them to walk away with?
I think it's that strength. It doesn't always come from brute force. It can come from adaptability, from cunning, from understanding your environment deeply, and from the power of community. The Apaches, they show us that even when outnumbered, outgunned, we can still achieve incredible things.
Their story reminds us that the human spirit, it can overcome even the most daunting obstacles.
Absolutely. And that sometimes the most valuable lessons come from those unexpected places.
Thanks for joining us on this journey into the heart of Apache warfare. Until next time, keep diving deep. And remember, as the Apaches teach us, we are stronger together.